The camera pans across wide-open plains, golden with sunset. A lone rider on horseback cuts a familiar figure against the horizon. For decades, this image has been synonymous with one name, Kevin Costner. The cowboy hero. The rugged leading man. The Oscar-winning director who gave us Dances with Wolves. A symbol of Americana, strength, and Hollywood dreams fulfilled. But for every sweeping cinematic triumph, there was a private battle raging far from the lights of the movie set. Because if Kevin Costner's career looks like a Hollywood fairytale, his love life has played out more like a roller coaster, filled with devotion, betrayal, heartbreak, scandal, reconciliation, and heartbreak all over again. From his early days as a young dreamer in California, supported by his college sweetheart Cindy Silva, to the glittering heights of movie stardom, Costner seemed to have it all: a beautiful wife, 3 children, and a career that was rewriting Hollywood history. He wasn't just the face on the big screen. He was the image of a family man who had conquered the impossible. But Hollywood has a way of testing even the strongest of bonds. As Kevin's fame grew, Oscar statues, blockbuster premieres, international tours, so too did the cracks in his marriage. What started as a fairy tale ended in one of the most expensive and publicized divorces of the 1990s. Suddenly, the man who played heroes on screen was painted in tabloids as the villain of his own story. And yet, Kevin's heart refused to stay broken. The years that followed were anything but quiet. From high-profile affairs and whirlwind romances to the birth of a son outside of marriage, Costner's private life became as talked about as his films. To some, he was Hollywood's most desirable bachelor. To others, he was a man lost in the chaos of fame, trying desperately to find something lasting, something real. Then, just when the world thought Kevin Costner had given up on true love, a new chapter began. Christine Baumgartner, a model and handbag designer nearly 20 years his junior, stepped into his life. She wasn't just another name in the tabloids. She was steady, grounded, determined. Against the odds, she gave Kevin what he thought he might never have again: a second chance at family, stability, and happiness. Together, they built a life away from Hollywood's chaos, raising 3 children and appearing, at least to the public eye, unshakable. But as the old saying goes, even the strongest ranch house can crack under pressure. In 2023, Christine filed for divorce, and the seemingly perfect marriage unraveled in the same way his first one had decades before. The news shocked fans across the world. Was Kevin Costner doomed to repeat history? Or was this simply another chapter in a love story still unfolding? Today, at nearly 70, Kevin Costner stands at a crossroads. He is still a legend, still commanding the screen in projects like Yellowstone and his ambitious Western saga Horizon. But more than that, he is a man who has lived and loved deeply, who has lost and rebuilt, and who, despite it all, continues to believe in love. Because behind the awards, the fame, and the cowboy hats lies a heart that refuses to give up on connection. This is not just the story of a movie star. It is the story of a man who has loved, lost, and dared to love again. Behind every Hollywood legend lies a story the cameras never tell. This is Kevin Costner's untold journey of love, heartbreak, and hope. The story of Kevin Costner doesn't begin in Hollywood. It begins in the quiet suburbs of Southern California, far from red carpets and flashing cameras. Born on January 18, 1955, in Linwood, California, Kevin Michael Costner was the youngest of 3 boys. His father, William Costner, was an electrician for Southern California Edison, while his mother, Sharon, was a welfare worker. They weren't wealthy, but what they lacked in riches they made up for in values: faith, hard work, humility, and family. Kevin grew up in a household where dreams were encouraged, but practicality was king. His parents taught him to be respectful, grounded, and never afraid of rolling up his sleeves. As a boy, Kevin wasn't the loudest or the biggest. In fact, he often described himself as shy and undersized. Yet he carried something that couldn't be measured in inches, an imagination that stretched farther than the California skies above him. In his teenage years, Kevin wasn't the obvious candidate for Hollywood stardom. He wasn't the captain of the football team or the class clown. Instead, he was a boy who loved storytelling, who found himself drawn to art, writing, and later, performing. Still, acting didn't seem like a realistic career. After all, who from Compton or Linwood made it to Hollywood. Instead, Kevin focused on his education, attending California State University, Fullerton, where he studied business. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. It was there, in the late 1970s, that Kevin met the woman who would change his life forever, Cindy Silva. She wasn't a Hollywood actress, nor a glamorous model. Cindy was a fellow student, kind-hearted, beautiful, and steady in a way Kevin desperately needed. Friends would later say that Cindy brought out the best in him. She was grounded, focused, and deeply loyal, exactly the kind of partner a young dreamer like Kevin required. Their romance blossomed quickly. To Kevin, Cindy was more than just a girlfriend. She was a reflection of the values he'd grown up with: commitment, stability, and love built on trust rather than fame. He once described her as beautiful, smarter than me, and more mature than me. It wasn't long before Kevin knew she was the one. In 1978, at just 23 years old, Kevin Costner married Cindy Silva. Their wedding wasn't the extravagant Hollywood affair we imagine today. It was simple, intimate, and filled with the promise of a future that, at that moment, felt limitless. The couple dreamed of a life together, raising children, building a family, and supporting one another through whatever lay ahead. But marriage, especially to a man chasing uncertain dreams, required sacrifice. Kevin wasn't yet a star. In fact, he was barely making ends meet. After graduation, he briefly worked as a marketing executive, but his heart wasn't in it. He wanted to act. The problem? Hollywood didn't want him, at least not yet. Auditions were grueling, rejections constant. Kevin would come home discouraged, but Cindy never wavered. She believed in him even when he doubted himself. At times, she even took on extra work to keep them afloat financially, allowing Kevin the freedom to chase his passion. Friends recall her as his anchor, the one who steadied him when the waves of rejection threatened to drown his confidence. During these early years, the Costners lived modestly. There were no limousines or Beverly Hills mansions, just a young couple scraping by in Los Angeles, sharing hammer-down furniture and dinners that sometimes stretched a little too thin. Yet what they lacked in luxury, they made up for in devotion. Kevin's first big break didn't come easily. In fact, some of his earliest parts were so small they barely registered. Blink and you miss him roles in films like Night Shift. At one point, he even took on odd jobs, truck driving, giving tours on Hollywood Boulevard, to support his dream. Through it all, Cindy was there, cheering him on, reminding him of the bigger picture. Looking back, Kevin often credited Cindy with giving him the stability he needed to survive those rough early years. She provided the home life, the comfort, and the unconditional belief that gave him the courage to keep going. Without Cindy Silva, Kevin Costner might never have had the persistence to push through the countless closed doors that lined his path to stardom. By the early 1980s, things began to shift. Kevin started landing roles that offered more than a few seconds of screen time. With Silver Ado in 1985, audiences began to notice him. Critics saw a natural charisma, a rugged charm that stood out. Hollywood was finally opening its doors. And as Kevin's star began to rise, Cindy was right there by his side, the proud wife of a man she had believed in from the very beginning. It was, in many ways, the perfect love story. A young man with dreams bigger than himself, and the woman who believed enough for both of them. Together, they were building a life, a marriage rooted not in the glitz of Hollywood, but in the kind of loyalty and devotion that seemed unshakable. At least, that's how it seemed. Because what neither of them could have known was that the very success they had both prayed for, the fame, the roles, the stardom, would soon become the very thing that tested the strength of their love. When Kevin Costner finally caught his break, it was like a dam bursting after years of struggle. Hollywood had overlooked him for so long that when the right role came, he seized it with a quiet intensity that turned heads. The late 1980s became Kevin's golden doorway into stardom. His first real splash came with Silver Ado, 1985, a western that allowed him to showcase his natural charisma. But the true turning point came just 2 years later. In 1987, Kevin took on the role of Elliot Ness in Brian De Palma's The Untouchables, starring alongside giants like Sean Connery and Robert De Niro. Suddenly, Kevin Costner wasn't just another hopeful actor, he was a bona fide leading man. From there, his momentum only grew. No Way Out, 1987, proved he could carry a suspense thriller. Bull Durham, 1988, revealed his effortless charm and cemented him as a romantic lead. And then came Field of Dreams, 1989, a film that not only defined Kevin's career but also etched itself into American culture. Playing Ray Kinsella, a farmer who builds a baseball diamond in his cornfield after hearing a mysterious voice, Kevin embodied the everyman dreamer. The line "If you build it, he will come" became an anthem, and Kevin became the face of hope, integrity, and family values. By the dawn of the 1990s, Kevin Costner wasn't just a movie star, he was a cultural icon. He represented something deeply American, the rugged, earnest hero who fought for justice, chased his dreams, and protected his family. And speaking of family, Kevin had one of his own. At home, he and Cindy had already welcomed 3 children: Annie, born in 1984, Lily, born in 1986, and Joe, born in 1988. While Kevin was filming blockbuster after blockbuster, Cindy was raising their children, building a warm and stable household away from Hollywood's glare. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect picture. Kevin Costner, Hollywood's golden boy, and Cindy Silva, the devoted wife who had been there from the beginning. The media fed into this narrative. Articles painted Kevin as not just a talented actor and director, but a model husband and father. Photos of him at family events, playing with his children, and attending red carpets with Cindy made their way into magazines. For a time, Kevin was the rare Hollywood figure who seemed to have it all, a thriving career and a happy family life. But behind the curtain, the truth was more complicated. Fame is intoxicating, but it also comes with a cost. Kevin was away from home for long stretches, filming on location across the country and sometimes overseas. Projects like Dances with Wolves, which he not only starred in but also directed and produced, consumed months, sometimes years, of his time. While Kevin was chasing Oscars, Cindy was left juggling the responsibilities of motherhood largely on her own. The gap between their worlds grew wider with each passing year. Kevin was adored by millions, pursued by directors, producers, and, inevitably, by women. The tabloid press began to whisper about alleged affairs. Rumors swirled of flings on film sets, late-night parties, and romantic entanglements with co-stars. Whether true or exaggerated, these stories placed an undeniable strain on Kevin and Cindy's marriage. Cindy had always been Kevin's anchor, the one who supported him through rejection and poverty. But now, she found herself competing with an entire world that demanded pieces of him. Hollywood executives, endless filming schedules, fans, and gossip columns. Her quiet life, once so well matched with Kevin's dreams, now felt overshadowed by the machine of stardom. Kevin himself seemed caught between 2 worlds. On one hand, he deeply loved his family. He often spoke publicly about being a father, describing it as his greatest role. On the other hand, he was addicted to the momentum of his career, the thrill of success, and the opportunities that came with it. Few actors in Hollywood history have experienced such a meteoric rise in such a short time, and Kevin was determined not to let it slip away. But that determination came with consequences. The very qualities that made him a star, his work ethic, his ambition, his willingness to push himself beyond limits, were also the ones that eroded his marriage. Cindy began to feel like a spectator in her own husband's life, raising their children while Kevin's world expanded further and further beyond their reach. The cracks were small at first. Arguments over time apart. Frustrations about the spotlight and the gossip. A sense that the man she had married, the struggling actor she had once supported with every ounce of her strength, was slipping away, replaced by a Hollywood giant she barely recognized. Still, to the outside world, they kept up appearances. The Costners remained a staple of Hollywood red carpets. Kevin continued to collect accolades, culminating in his crowning achievement, Dances with Wolves, 1990, which won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. Kevin's acceptance speech included thanks to Cindy, acknowledging her role in his journey. For many, it seemed proof that their marriage remained solid despite the pressure. But the truth is, success can be as corrosive as failure. For Kevin and Cindy, the very dream they had built together, the dream of Hollywood, was becoming the wedge that pushed them apart. By the early 1990s, the strain was undeniable. Hollywood was whispering louder. Cindy was exhausted. And Kevin, though still at the peak of his career, was about to face the greatest personal challenge of his life. The seeds of trouble had been planted. All it would take was time and the relentless pull of fame for those cracks to grow into fractures. By the mid-1990s, Kevin Costner had become one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. He had collected Oscars for Dances with Wolves, starred in back-to-back blockbusters, and reigned as America's favorite leading man. To the public, his life seemed like the stuff of dreams, fame, fortune, and a beautiful family. But behind the carefully polished image, the Costners' marriage was reaching a breaking point. For years, Kevin's relentless career had pulled him in one direction while Cindy held steady in another. The Hollywood grind was merciless. Kevin would spend months on location, sometimes in remote corners of the world, leaving Cindy to raise their 3 young children alone. What had once been manageable absences grew longer, more frequent, and more emotionally taxing. Cindy, who had once believed in the dream as much as Kevin did, began to feel increasingly isolated from her husband's world. And then there were the rumors. Hollywood gossip magazines thrived on scandal, and Kevin Costner's name was a guaranteed headline. Stories of flirtations and alleged affairs swirled around film sets. Whether the rumors were fact or fiction hardly mattered. What mattered was that they made their way to Cindy, and each new whisper chipped away at the trust that had once been unshakable. Kevin always insisted that his heart was with his family, but the pressures of fame and the temptation that came with it were undeniable. By 1994, the cracks in their marriage had become impossible to ignore. After 16 years together, Kevin and Cindy announced their separation. It was not just another Hollywood split, it became one of the most expensive divorces in entertainment history. Cindy reportedly received an $80 million settlement, a staggering sum that reflected both Kevin's immense success and the life they had built together from the ground up. The divorce was front-page news. Tabloids feasted on every detail, painting wildly different narratives. Some stories portrayed Kevin as the unfaithful movie star who had thrown away a devoted wife for fame and temptation. Others painted Cindy as the weary spouse who had finally had enough of living in her husband's shadow. Neither narrative told the whole story, but in the court of public opinion, lines were quickly drawn. For Cindy, the divorce was deeply personal but also public in a way she had never wanted. Unlike Kevin, she had never sought the spotlight. Friends described her as a woman who valued her privacy, who cared more about raising her children than attending premieres. Suddenly, she was thrust into headlines, her heartbreak dissected by strangers. It was a cruel twist of fate for the woman who had sacrificed so much to help Kevin reach the top. For Kevin, the toll was twofold. On one hand, he was still riding high professionally. He had just come off films like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves and The Bodyguard, cementing his reputation as Hollywood's golden boy. On the other hand, his personal life was unraveling in the most public way imaginable. The image of Kevin as the perfect husband and father, a cornerstone of his public persona, was shattered. The emotional strain was immense. Kevin admitted in later interviews that the divorce left him shaken. He loved his children deeply and feared losing his place in their lives. At the same time, he struggled with guilt over the marriage that had ended, guilt over the perception that he had chosen fame over family, guilt over the whispers that followed him everywhere he went. The public reaction was mixed. Many sympathized with Cindy, the college sweetheart who had given Kevin everything only to see their marriage collapse under the weight of Hollywood. Others stood by Kevin, arguing that no one could survive the pressures of fame without personal sacrifices. Either way, the divorce marked a turning point. Kevin was no longer just the clean-cut family man who built baseball fields in cornfields. He was now also a cautionary tale about the cost of success. The scandal didn't destroy Kevin's career, but it did alter his reputation. Tabloids began framing him less as America's everyman and more as Hollywood's eligible bachelor, a man with money, power, and a trail of broken relationships. For years, journalists would tie his name to one rumored romance after another, a far cry from the steady image he had cultivated during his marriage to Cindy. And yet, even in the wake of the divorce, Kevin remained fiercely committed to his children. He made time to be present in their lives despite his filming schedule, determined not to let his mistakes as a husband define him as a father. Friends and colleagues often remarked that beneath the Hollywood star was a man who, above all else, wanted to be a good dad. Looking back, Kevin would describe the divorce as one of the most painful chapters of his life. He had achieved everything he once dreamed of professionally, but the personal cost was staggering. Cindy had been his first love, his anchor, the woman who believed in him when no one else did. Losing her wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the closing of an entire chapter of his life story. In the years that followed, Kevin tried to move forward, but the scars of the divorce remained. Hollywood's brightest star was now a man whose personal life had been laid bare, his vulnerabilities exposed for the world to see. And so, the question lingered. Could Kevin Costner rebuild not just his career, but his heart? Or had the price of fame been too great, leaving him forever marked by the love he had lost? When Kevin Costner's marriage to Cindy Silva ended in 1994, the world suddenly saw him in a new light. No longer the family man with 3 kids waiting at home, he was recast by Hollywood and the tabloids as something else entirely, the ultimate bachelor. With his rugged good looks, Oscar-winning resume, and reputation as one of the most bankable stars of the 1990s, Kevin became catnip for gossip magazines. Every dinner, every party appearance, and every co-star sparked headlines. For Kevin, the post-divorce years were complicated. On the surface, he embraced his new role, a Hollywood playboy with no strings attached. But behind the headlines, he admitted later, there was an ache, a longing for stability that often clashed with the temptations that fame laid before him. Almost immediately after his divorce, Kevin's name began appearing alongside some of the world's most glamorous women. Birgit Cunningham, a British socialite and activist, was one of his early post-divorce companions. Their relationship was short-lived, but the press feasted on the pairing, highlighting the stark contrast between Kevin's cowboy Americana persona and Birgit's jet-set European lifestyle. Then came Naomi Campbell, the supermodel whose beauty and fame rivaled his own. The idea of Kevin Costner and Naomi Campbell as an item sent tabloids into overdrive, even though the relationship was more fling than foundation. Courteney Cox, before she became a household name with friends, was also briefly linked to Kevin. It was never clear how serious things were, but the rumor mill churned non-stop, feeding the idea that Costner had access to Hollywood's most desirable women. And then there were whispers of Michelle Pfeiffer, one of the era's most luminous actresses. Whether it was a close friendship or something more, tabloids loved the suggestion that Kevin and Michelle had crossed paths romantically. Kevin himself rarely confirmed or denied these rumors. "When you're single, they connect you with everyone," he once said, brushing off the speculation. Still, the stories shaped his image. Kevin Costner, the man who couldn't walk into a room without sparking romance rumors. Of all the names tied to Kevin during this bachelor era, one relationship had the most lasting impact. Bridget Rooney, a Pittsburgh socialite and heiress to the Rooney family, owners of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their romance didn't last long, but it led to something permanent, the birth of his son, Liam Timothy Costner, in 1996. At first, Kevin was hesitant to accept his role in Liam's life. The breakup with Bridget had been messy, and Kevin struggled with balancing his Hollywood lifestyle with his responsibilities as a father to a child outside of marriage. But in time, he stepped up. He acknowledged Liam as his son and supported him, ensuring that, despite the unconventional beginnings, Liam would grow up with his father's presence and name. The story of Bridget and Liam once again thrust Kevin's personal life into the spotlight. Tabloids loved the narrative. The movie star caught between bachelorhood and fatherhood, trying to navigate love, responsibility, and reputation. For Kevin, though, it was another reminder that his private choices were never really private. By the late 1990s, Kevin Costner's bachelor lifestyle had become part of his brand. He was photographed at premieres with stunning women, spotted on yachts in Europe, and endlessly speculated about in gossip columns. The press dubbed him one of Hollywood's most eligible men, a label that seemed glamorous but came with its own pressures. Privately, Kevin admitted the bachelor years weren't as carefree as the magazines made them look. In interviews, he spoke about how hard it was to find real love when everyone wanted something from him. "The truth is, I struggle like anyone else," he once said. "I've made mistakes, I've been careless, and sometimes I've been alone in a crowded room." His words painted a different picture from the one tabloids sold. Behind the glamorous images was a man wrestling with loneliness, unsure if he would ever find the kind of lasting partnership he once had with Cindy Silva. The irony wasn't lost on Kevin. The same fame that had once lifted him to superstardom was now a barrier to intimacy. Any woman he dated, whether seriously or casually, was instantly thrust into the spotlight. Every relationship became a public event, dissected by strangers, criticized by fans, and magnified by paparazzi lenses. Friends say Kevin often confided about how difficult it was to know who truly cared for him. Was it Kevin the man, or Kevin the star, that people wanted? It was a question that haunted him throughout this period. Still, Kevin continued to date, to explore, and to search. He was a man unwilling to give up on love, even as the world insisted on casting him as a perpetual bachelor. The bachelor years defined Kevin in the eyes of the public, but privately they were a time of searching for balance, searching for meaning, searching for someone who could understand both the man and the legend. While the headlines made him seem unstoppable, Kevin himself admitted in rare moments of honesty that he sometimes felt adrift. Love had once been simple for him, a college sweetheart, a shared dream, a marriage built on hope. Now, in the glare of fame, it had become complicated, transactional, and fragile. But if there was one thing Kevin Costner never lacked, it was perseverance. Just as he had fought to make his mark in Hollywood when no one believed in him, he was determined not to let heartbreak define him. Somewhere beyond the noise, beyond the flings and the rumors, he still believed real love was possible. And eventually, he would find it again. By the late 1990s, after years of tabloid-fueled romances and fleeting connections, Kevin Costner was still searching for something real. That search led him to a woman who would eventually redefine his life. Christine Baumgartner, a model and handbag designer more than 20 years his junior. Their meeting was quiet, away from the chaos of red carpets and paparazzi, but its impact would be enormous. Christine was striking, poised, and grounded in a way that Kevin found refreshing. She wasn't dazzled by the Hollywood spotlight, she was intrigued by the man behind it. Their relationship began slowly, with Kevin cautious after his divorce and the tumultuous bachelor years. The connection was undeniable, but so were the obstacles. The biggest challenge was Kevin's fear of having more children. He already had 4 kids from previous relationships and was hesitant about starting that journey again. Christine, however, had a clear vision of the family life she wanted, and children were part of that picture. This difference created tension between them. For a time, it even drove them apart. Christine ended the relationship, unwilling to compromise on her dream of being a mother. It was a painful split, but she knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to walk away. For Kevin, it was a wake-up call. He realized that in Christine, he had found more than a partner. He had found someone who challenged him, who wouldn't simply bend to his fears or insecurities. After months of separation, Kevin reconsidered. He had built a career playing strong, decisive men on screen, but in real life, he was facing a deeply personal choice: cling to the safety of his past or take the risk of building a new future. Christine's ultimatum forced him to face what truly mattered. He loved her, and he knew that letting her go would mean losing the chance at the stability he had been craving. Their reunion marked a turning point. Kevin overcame his hesitation and embraced the idea of starting fresh. In 2004, surrounded by family and close friends, Kevin and Christine married in a picture-perfect ceremony at his 165-acre ranch in Aspen, Colorado. The sprawling property, with its breathtaking mountain views and rustic charm, reflected Kevin's love of the land and symbolized a new beginning. Guests arrived in horse-drawn carriages, a cinematic touch befitting a Hollywood legend. For Kevin, it was more than a wedding. It was the start of a new chapter he never thought he'd write. Marriage to Christine brought a sense of stability that had been missing from Kevin's life for years. Soon, the couple welcomed 3 children, Caden, Hayes, and Grace. Against all his initial fears, Kevin embraced fatherhood once again, this time with the wisdom of experience and the grounding presence of Christine by his side. Life at the Colorado ranch provided a retreat from Hollywood, a place where Kevin could focus on his family away from the noise of tabloids and flashing cameras. Christine played a vital role during this chapter of Kevin's life. She wasn't just a wife, she was a steadying force who supported him through career highs and lows. By the early 2000s, Kevin's star power had dimmed compared to the unstoppable run of the late 80s and early 90s. Critics questioned whether his glory days were behind him. But Christine encouraged him to pursue the projects that reignited his passion, including smaller films and his eventual return to prominence through directing, producing, and television. Their marriage seemed to balance Kevin in ways nothing else had. Where his first marriage collapsed under the weight of fame, Christine and Kevin carved out a quieter life anchored in family and the ranch. The public, too, began to see a new image of Kevin Costner, not as the Hollywood bachelor or the heartbroken divorce, but as a devoted husband and father finding joy in simplicity. Of course, the spotlight never fully dimmed. The media still followed their every move, fascinated by the age difference and by Kevin's willingness to embrace fatherhood again so late in life. Yet, unlike in the past, Kevin seemed unbothered. He was secure in his marriage, confident in his choices, and unafraid of what the tabloids said. He once admitted in interviews that Christine had given him the gift of perspective. "She makes me a better man," he confessed, a rare glimpse into the vulnerability behind the stoic exterior. As the years passed, Kevin's career experienced a revival. Roles in films like Open Range and later the massive success of the television series Yellowstone reminded audiences of his enduring star power. Through it all, Christine remained a constant presence, supporting him during long shoots and ensuring their children grew up with as much normalcy as possible. The ranch became their sanctuary, a place where Kevin could trade the chaos of Hollywood for the quiet rhythms of family life. For nearly 2 decades, Kevin and Christine's marriage was seen as a Hollywood success story, a second chance at love that seemed to defy the odds. It gave him the stability he had been chasing since the painful end of his first marriage, grounding him during his professional resurgence and offering him the family life he once thought was behind him. And yet, as history would prove, even the strongest seeming foundations can be shaken. Years later, cracks would emerge, leading to another heartbreaking chapter in Kevin's story. But during those early years with Christine, Kevin Costner truly believed he had finally found the balance between love, family, and fame, a harmony that had eluded him for so long. For nearly 2 decades, Kevin Costner and Christine Baumgartner had seemed untouchable. Their marriage, forged at his Colorado ranch and nurtured far from Hollywood's glare, appeared to be the rare kind of love story that endured. They had 3 beautiful children, a sprawling retreat in Aspen, and the image of a couple who had weathered fame and found something lasting. To the outside world, theirs was proof that second chances could work, that even in Hollywood, where marriages often lasted shorter than movie premieres, stability was possible. That's why, in May of 2023, the news landed like a thunderclap. Christine Baumgartner filed for divorce after 18 years of marriage, citing the familiar but devastating phrase, irreconcilable differences. It was shocking not just because of the longevity of their union, but because Kevin and Christine had always seemed so steady, so solid. The headlines poured in within minutes, and social media erupted with disbelief. For fans, it felt like watching one of Hollywood's most grounded love stories collapse in real time. The court documents told a simple story: 2 people whose marriage had reached its breaking point. But behind that simple phrase, rumors swirled. Some pointed to Kevin's grueling work schedule, especially his commitment to the hit series Yellowstone, which demanded long stretches away from home. Others speculated about money, disagreements over finances, properties, and the demands of maintaining both a Hollywood lifestyle and a quiet family life. Still others whispered about distance, not in miles but in emotion, as the years wore on and their once solid foundation began to crack. For Kevin, the filing was a blow. Just as his career had been revitalized, thanks in large part to the runaway success of Yellowstone, his personal life was falling apart. Friends close to him admitted he was stunned. He had built his world around Christine and their children, often describing his marriage as a gift he never thought he'd receive after his divorce from Cindy Silva. To suddenly be facing the end of it left him shaken. Christine, for her part, was firm. She requested joint custody of their 3 children but also filed for financial support, citing her role in raising their family while Kevin's career demanded so much of his time. What followed was a custody battle and financial negotiation that dragged into 2024, capturing the attention of the media at every turn. The press dissected every court filing, every quote from anonymous sources, and every sighting of Kevin or Christine. It was as if the world couldn't look away from the unraveling of their fairy tale. Tabloids speculated about tension over Kevin's filming commitments, about Christine's frustration with his long absences, and about the toll fame had once again taken on his private life. For Kevin, the narrative felt hauntingly familiar. Decades earlier, his first marriage had crumbled under the pressures of Hollywood. Now, history seemed to be repeating itself. In September 2024, the divorce was finalized. Christine walked away with a significant settlement, though not without compromises and contested battles along the way. Kevin agreed to financial arrangements and custody terms that ensured the children would be cared for, though the negotiations had been fraught and bitter at times. The ordeal left scars on both sides, but it also offered a resolution, an end to a chapter that had once seemed destined to last forever. The public reaction was telling. Fans who had admired Kevin and Christine's marriage were devastated, expressing sorrow and disbelief across social media. For many, the couple had represented hope, that love could be rekindled, that family life could thrive even under the harshest spotlight. To see it fall apart was a reminder of how fragile even the strongest seeming bonds could be. The media, meanwhile, wasted no time in crafting narratives. Some outlets framed Christine as the woman who had finally had enough of Kevin's work-first lifestyle. Others painted Kevin as the heartbroken star blindsided by a wife who no longer wanted to fight for their marriage. In truth, the reality was likely far more complex, the quiet unraveling of two lives lived in tandem for nearly 2 decades. Kevin himself maintained a dignified silence for much of the ordeal, speaking only sparingly about the situation. When he did, his words reflected both pain and resolve. He acknowledged the difficulty of the process but emphasized his commitment to his children, making it clear that fatherhood remained his anchor. By the end of 2024, the dust had settled. The marriage that had once been Kevin's second chance at love was over, leaving him once again in the role of single father and eligible bachelor. But this time, the circumstances were different. He was older, wiser, and more aware of the challenges that fame and family carried. And though the pain was real, there was also a sense of resilience, the same determination that had carried him through heartbreak before. For the public, Kevin's divorce was another reminder of the high cost of life in the spotlight. Behind the success, behind the awards and the iconic roles, there was a man who had given his heart more than once and seen it broken. Yet there was also hope, because if Kevin Costner's story revealed anything, it was that even after loss, love could still be found again. In the wake of his 2024 divorce, Kevin Costner found himself at another crossroads. Professionally, he stood tall, riding the wave of renewed success thanks to Yellowstone and his ambitious Western saga Horizon, an American saga. Personally, however, he was once again in uncharted waters, single, cautious, and very aware that the world was watching his every move. At 69, Kevin was far from retreating into the quiet life. He threw himself into work, not just as an actor but as a filmmaker, chasing the same passion that had fueled his rise decades earlier. Horizon wasn't just a project, it was a labor of love, a sweeping multi-part epic that Kevin had been dreaming about for years. It was proof that even after decades in Hollywood, his creative fire hadn't dimmed. Yet no matter how busy his professional life became, one truth guided him: family came first. His children remained his anchor, the reason he grounded himself at his Colorado ranch and kept perspective on what really mattered. The paparazzi, of course, were relentless. Almost immediately after the divorce was finalized, speculation about Kevin's love life resurfaced. Cameras followed him at public events, eager to capture any woman by his side. Rumors swirled, unnamed dinner companions, mysterious sightings, anonymous sources whispering about the new woman in Kevin's life. Some stories paired him with fellow actors, others with younger women spotted near his ranch or at premieres. Few of the claims were substantiated, but the noise was deafening. The press once again tried to cast him as Hollywood's eternal bachelor, echoing the image from the 1990s. Kevin, however, approached it differently this time. In interviews, he acknowledged the speculation but didn't feed it. Instead, he focused on expressing a more vulnerable truth. He admitted that while heartbreak had taken its toll, he still believed in love. He hadn't given up on the possibility of companionship, of finding someone who could share both the quiet moments and the storms that came with his world. "I don't think the story's over," he hinted in one conversation, a gentle nod to the hope that lingered in him despite the pain of 2 divorces. Those words resonated with fans, many of whom saw in Kevin not just the movie star but a man who reflected their own struggles. He had experienced soaring highs, awards, fame, wealth, adoration. He had also endured devastating lows, scandals, heartbreak, public scrutiny, and loss. Through it all, he had never stopped moving forward, never stopped searching for meaning both on and off the screen. Friends described Kevin as more reflective in this stage of his life. He spent long stretches at his ranch, surrounded by the natural beauty he loved. He dedicated time to his younger children, wanting to be present for them in ways he sometimes couldn't during the height of his career. Yet he also kept his heart open. He hadn't become cynical, and he hadn't sworn off love. If anything, the trials of his past seemed to have deepened his belief that love, despite its risks, was worth pursuing. For audiences, Kevin Costner's story has always been larger than life. He's the cowboy who builds a baseball diamond in a cornfield, the bodyguard who carries Whitney Houston into safety, the lawman who takes down Capone. But beyond those roles, his personal journey reveals a man deeply human, flawed yet resilient, scarred yet hopeful. His romances, marriages, and heartbreaks weren't just tabloid fodder. They were chapters in the ongoing narrative of someone trying, like everyone else, to find connection in an often disconnected world. Looking at his life today, it's clear Kevin has learned from each chapter. From Cindy Silva, he understood the sacrifices that love requires. From his bachelor years, he learned the emptiness of shallow connections. From Christine Baumgartner, he found stability and the joys of fatherhood a second time. And now, in this new chapter, he carries those lessons forward, hopeful but wiser, cautious but unbroken. Perhaps the most touching truth is that Kevin Costner, the man who has given audiences so many unforgettable love stories on screen, still believes his own greatest love story may be yet to come. As he himself once put it, "Maybe the best love story of my life hasn't been written yet." It is a thought both tender and powerful, a reminder that even legends are human, and even at 69, hope can burn brighter than regret. Kevin Costner's story has always been larger than the silver screen. To millions, he is the cowboy, the lawman, the romantic hero who fought for love against all odds. But beyond the applause and the Academy Awards lies a far more complicated and deeply human journey, one that unfolded not under studio lights, but in the quiet corners of his personal life. It began with Cindy Silva, the college sweetheart who stood by him when he was just another young dreamer chasing Hollywood. Together, they built a life and a family. She worked to keep them afloat while he pursued roles that seemed impossible at the time. Their marriage was the bedrock of his early years, a reminder that behind every star is someone who believed in them before the world did. But the pressures of fame, the endless filming schedules, and the temptations that come with a life lived in the spotlight eventually took their toll. What began as a fairy tale ended in one of Hollywood's most painful and expensive divorces. Out of that heartbreak emerged another version of Kevin, the bachelor, the headline magnate, the man whose name was whispered alongside some of the most glamorous women in the world. From Bridget Rooney, with whom he fathered a son, to countless rumored romances, the tabloids devoured every detail. And yet, for all the speculation, it was clear Kevin was searching for something deeper. He admitted it himself. Despite the attention, despite the whirlwind of Hollywood, he was still struggling to find real love. Then Christine Baumgartner entered his life. Younger, poised, and determined, she challenged him in ways few others had. She gave him an ultimatum when he hesitated about building a family again, and ultimately, Kevin chose her. Their 2004 wedding at his Colorado ranch was the beginning of a new chapter. One filled with 3 children, ranch life, and the stability that had long eluded him. For nearly 2 decades, they seemed to have found what so many Hollywood couples could not: balance. But even the strongest unions face storms. In 2023, the news of Christine's divorce filing stunned fans and friends alike. After nearly 19 years, their marriage ended in a very public and painful split. Once again, Kevin was forced to face the heartbreak of watching love unravel under the weight of irreconcilable differences. The custody battles, the speculation, the headlines, All of it became another chapter in a personal life that often seemed as dramatic as his films. And yet, Kevin Costner endures. Today, his focus is on his children, his ranch, and his creative legacy with projects like Horizon. But what makes his story resonate even more is not just his resilience as an artist. It's his resilience as a man who has not given up on love. Even after 2 divorces, even after decades of being scrutinized by the press, he still speaks with hope. In interviews, he has hinted that perhaps the best love story of his life hasn't been written yet. It is here that Kevin Costner's journey becomes universal. His career reminds us of the magic of cinema, but his personal story reminds us of something more powerful. Success on screen does not guarantee happiness in love. Heartbreak can find anyone, even legends. And yet, so can hope. As the credits roll on this chapter of his life, one thing remains clear. Kevin Costner's journey, from college sweetheart to heartbreak, from bachelor years to second chances, from another painful split to a renewed belief in love, proves that the human heart never stops searching. After years of dating, affairs, and divorce, Kevin Costner shows us that it's never too late to believe in love again.